Hey guys! I promised that I would have a video out on Wednesday, and then I said I'd have it on Thursday, and then I said I'd have it out on Friday, and here we are, it's Saturday. But it's time to be real. One of the things about me is I am never good at planning. I get tired quickly. I work really interesting hours, so I get very tired at the end of the day, and I really don't feel like it some days. But on top of all that, I have chronic migraines, and so some days I need to take care of myself before I go and do these. And with all of the smoke and the fires outside, I just haven't felt great. And it's really messing with my migraines. So here we are at Saturday, finally videoing this. So this week we won't really get into all the ways to say how you're feeling. We'll leave that till next week. Sorry about that, guys. But as promised, I will give you all of the do's, do nots, and ways to get someone's attention who's deaf that I can think of, and then I'll do a fun fact and a deaf culture fact. But there's no way for my brain to remember all of that order, so I wrote it all down. So let's get started. Okay, so we are going to start with all of the do's. So, do number 1 is during introductions, always introduce yourself first, and then use the sign language alphabet to finger spell out your name. One of the do nots with this is do not give yourself a sign name. If you are a hearing person, it is considered rude to give yourself a sign name because that is something the deaf culture sets aside for a deaf person to do. When you get to know a deaf person and all of that, they may or may not give you a sign name, but that's up to them. And yeah, so I got my sign name from my deaf ASL teacher, and he is amazing. But yeah, it technically means turkey, and it took me a while to figure that out. But yeah, so make sure to spell out your name if you don't have a sign name. I like to do both. I like to spell out my name and then do my sign name because, as I said, it would mean that my name's Turkey. So I like people to know what it actually is. When finger spelling or signing, this is something I struggle with, but it's because my hands are shaky, and sometimes I just don't feel good. And so one of the things you want to make sure to do is not to have a bumpy hand. Like, don't shake, don't do all that. So A-S-H-L-E-Y is a very steady hand. A way that I can make that very unsteady and very hard to read would be A-S-H-L-E-Y. Another thing is when people go up and down with all of their letters. It's really confusing and it's hard to read, and it really is very a beginner thing to do, but it's okay to do if you're struggling. No one's going to be mean to you for it. They just might ask you to slow down and stop moving. It's kind of the same as if someone was moving a poster they wanted you to read. It's harder to read if it's moving. So make sure to keep a steady hand and to not be shaking. Okay, another fun thing is maintain eye contact. One of the hardest things to do when starting out is to not look at the person's hand. I do this while I'm signing to you guys because I'm checking to make sure it looks right in the video, and checking to make sure that you can read it. But when you're communicating with someone, you don't want to focus on their hands. You want to focus up here because, as I said in a different video, that facial expressions are everything in ASL because the same sign means multiple different things. If you have different emotions, you could be being sarcastic, you could be angry about something, you could be happy. It all depends on how your face looks, because there's no way to sign angry without showing emotion. There are ways that you can speed up your sign, it seems more aggravated, but without facial expression, you're a very boring signer. And so, unlike the deaf community, our community sees this as staring at people, to constantly maintain eye contact. It's very uncomfortable. It's something that not a lot of people do. Another hard thing is to make facial expressions. In our society, it's very weird for people to be so animated. And it may seem a little goofy at first, but it makes you amazing at signing because people can read your emotions and they can feel your energy. And yeah, so make sure to kind of put all those society norms outside the window. Just put them out, because signing is not what you think it is. It's not English, and it definitely is a lot harder to fully get down than most people think it is, because there is so much to it. But once you get those down, it seems to be a breeze. I love learning new signs now because I know all of those tips. Okay, so let's continue. Okay, so how to get a deaf person's attention. Okay, so this is fairly interesting. It's not what most people think it is. Also, don't mind the hair, we washed cars today. But one of the first things is when you are approaching someone and you want to have a conversation with them, maintain eye contact. You want to be looking at them and showing them that you are interested in talking to them. And another way that you can get someone's attention if they're not looking at you, if they're like looking down, is to wave your hand slightly in their peripheral vision. So you can wave like this, or you can wave like this. I like to wave like this. Like put my arm out and go like this. Because for me, it's a lot easier to not be in someone's peripheral vision, but still end up with it in there. If they're looking down, it's a lot easier to put your hand out and wave it down, so that they can see it. Because if I'm looking down, I won't always see this. And that comes from me because I don't have a whole lot of peripheral vision. And so if people wave it down, I can see it. But you never know. So another thing to remember about this, though, is you don't want to wave frantically because that could mean that something's wrong. That is often used in emergency situations of, hey, I need your attention. Like, hey, something's wrong. It's kind of the same as yelling at people. You don't want to be so animated that you're hard to read your emotions. So if you're very frantic, it could be misinterpreted. Remember, they don't know what you're saying if they're completely deaf and they're not looking at you. They don't know that everything's fine and you're just trying to get their attention. So don't scare people. Make sure that you are waving at a good, appropriate speed, unless there's an emergency. Then frantically wave. Another thing is that if you are close enough to the person, a simple tap on the shoulder, not poking, you don't want to poke them, but a simple tap on the shoulder of, hey, can I talk to you? Or simple tap on the back or arm is easy to get their attention. It's also a preferred way if you're close enough to do so. But you want to make sure, again, not to poke or pull on people because that is used in emergency situations, once again. A good way of getting someone's attention, if you want the entire room's attention, or if their back is faced away from you and you're entering a room, is to flick the light on and off. But don't flick it too hard. Like, do not turn it on and off frantically, because once again, we don't want to scare people. But just flick it on and off, and that gets their attention. It's the same as yelling, listen up, in a crowd. Hey everyone, listen up. Like, I got something to say. Or warning them that you're entering a room. Another good way to get their attention if they're not facing you is to tap on the wall or stomp your feet a little. Because the vibrations, they can feel those. Don't do it too hard and don't do it too frantically because that could be misinterpreted. Once again, if you have a bad habit of tapping your fingers or tapping your foot, that also can be misinterpreted. So be careful of that too. But those are easy ways to get someone's attention. So Next up, we have the don'ts. So I already told you one of the don'ts, which is do not give yourself a sign name. That is something the deaf community does not like you doing if you are completely hearing. And so yeah, just make sure you're not overstepping that boundary. Again, do not grab or poke someone as you're walking up behind them. It's considered rude and is used in emergency situations. Okay, once again, okay, I feel bad that I have to say this one. I feel like it's common knowledge, but it could not be. Do not throw objects at them. Okay, that is not helpful. One, besides being just plain rude, it also could harm them. So, do not throw objects at people to get their attention. Basic elementary school rules. Don't throw things at people. Another no-no is chewing gum. As I said before, your face is used in a lot of ASL interpretations of your emotions. So chewing gum is hard to read your facial expressions. And a lot of times some people do use lip reading to understand what you're saying. And not every deaf person knows sign language. That is something that is often misinterpreted. Don't automatically assume just because someone's deaf they know ASL. But don't assume that they don't. It's easy to ask of, hey, do you sign? And if they don't, make sure to speak slowly so that they can read your lips. Not too slowly, because just like every other language, it doesn't really help when you speak very slowly and like enunciate everything dramatically. You just want to make sure that you aren't speaking too fast. You want to make sure that your mouth can be read, and that you're enunciating your words and using your full movement of your mouth. A lot of people, they get kind of lazy with talking, and they don't move their mouth as much as they should. Okay, so you're going to want to make sure also that if you're out at a meal with someone who's deaf, that you don't just automatically assume to order for them. Unless you are asked, do not do that. Don't order for them because they can't order for themselves. It's considered very rude, and kind of just assuming something's wrong with them, and that they can't communicate. A lot of deaf people are very accustomed to pointing to what they need to servers, and very good at doing it themselves. It's kind of like when you break something and you don't want everyone to do everything for you. It's the same mentality. You don't want everyone to do everything for you because you're perfectly capable. And so yeah, just don't order things for deaf people just automatically assuming that they can't do it themselves. Because unless you're asked, they don't want you to. Okay. And also, don't initiate a conversation about a deaf person's hearing loss. It's considered rude, and assuming that, once again, that they're not whole or that they're broken, or incomplete or inferior. And it's also a very sensitive subject. So unless they bring it up, don't ask. Just go with the flow because it's considered very rude. This really, you're not going to get yelled at for this one. You might get asked to move. But one major telltale sign that you are new to signing is that you sign with a bright light behind you. So like the sun or in front of a lamp. It's kind of the same as if you were trying to take a photo of someone and they were standing in front of a bright light. You're not going to be able to see them because it's just a black silhouette. So don't stand in front of bright lights and try to sign to people. One, it hurts their eyes, and two, they can't really tell what you're doing half the time because you're a black silhouette. So make sure not to. And if you do, don't worry, no one's going to be mad at you. They just might ask you to move so that they can see you and read what you're saying. And it's a dead giveaway that you are a beginner. Yeah, so those are a few of my do's and do nots to kind of fit in with the deaf community. So, fun fact of the week that I found out. I'm sure there have been more fun facts that have come out since I found this one. But fun fact that I found off of Deaf Nation on Facebook is that in New York, deaf people can now text 911 instead of calling. So you text 911 and you state that you are deaf, and they will text you and make sure that, so they want deaf people to make sure that they're not abbreviating anything, that they're typing out the entire thing, but it makes calling 911 a lot easier for people who cannot hear the operator back, because they're getting responses back now through text. So yeah, that is a fun fact for today. On to our deaf culture fact. So this is two of my favorite facts about ASL. But we'll get further into this. So fact number 1, okay, sign language is not universal, okay? It's not. A lot of people misinterpret that and think that sign language is universal because there's deaf people all over the world. There are different types of sign language. That's why it's called ASL, which is short for American Sign Language. You also have British Sign Language, you have Spanish Sign Language, you have Argentinian Sign Language, all of the works, okay? There are way too many for me to name, but there's a language out there. I bet you there's a sign language for it. That is its own sign language, and that is why it is not signed English. So there are different names other than ASL. There's signed English, there's signed exact English too. And so you don't want to just automatically assume that ASL is English. When people sign every single word, it's called SEE, which is signed exact English. And that is not ASL. So don't do that interpreting that it's ASL. ASL has its own grammar form and everything else. So don't just assume that signed English is ASL, which it's not. Okay, another way that this is a misinterpretation, that sign language is universal, is because most people are like, but it's similar to the French sign language. Yes, and there is a good reason for that. ASL is similar to French Sign Language in some ways, because one of the founders of I always butcher this name, sorry, the Gladiate University, the co-founder, was French. And so, yeah, there are going to be similarities to French Sign Language. But it does not mean that French Sign Language and American Sign Language are the exact same, because they're not. There's different words, there's different grammar, because they're different languages. And those are your fun facts for this week. And hope to see you next time. Love you guys. Remember to like and subscribe. Bye.